Hello, my name's Niranjan, the host of Master of Your Crafts podcast. Learning from leaders who are continuously inspired, passionate, and driven to align with their soul purpose, sharing their gifts to bring healing to others. The music is composed by Rebecca Everett. Today is episode number 49, and I'll be talking to Terence P. Elmore, an author, a poet, and a podcast host who's doing his part to spread love in a world that seems to be full of hate. One poem, one podcast, and one message at a time. He's the author of Love Letters, a collection of poems, and The Essence of Love. Both poetry collections are centered around love because he recognized the need to distinguish the difference between real love and misinterpreted love. Hello and welcome to Terence. How are you, Terence?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm excited for our conversation purely because it's been a while since we connected. And when I came across your profile, the Brown Sugar Cafe blog, I was in awe of the content from the books that you've written, the poetry that you've written, and the podcast that you've started, encompassing this beautiful, magical piece of love. And how it captured me from the essences of the poetry you create and the whole concept that everything is built around love in all of the pieces that you build, but also coming from, if I can say this, from a masculine energy, because typically it comes from a feminine energy as maybe more intuitive, more nurturing, more creative. So when I came across your profile, I was intrigued more to have this conversation and really delve into how you've harness this craft of poetry and writing about love. So please share with us, what do you believe about yourself as you embark on this journey, or have embarked on this journey of the definition of love, and does it define who you are?
Wow. Wonderful intro and question. For me, love is something beautiful. And I was at a point where I was realizing a lot of people were talking about love as if it was something horrible, if it was something painful. And all of those things, when people are speaking negatively about love, it's not love. It's always, when you ask them, like, how do you feel? Why do you feel like love is pain? Why do you feel like love is hurtful? They always name a person. So I look at the situation that might have caused a person hurt or some sort of heartbreak as, let's say a drunk driver hits somebody. They don't say that the car hit them. They blame it on the person. So I look at love as like a vehicle, a vehicle to help us move around the world, to help us connect with each other. And if somebody hurt you operating the vehicle of love, it was that person. And so they mishandled love, and they were a misrepresentative of love. And so I started this journey to spread love and to show people who don't realize that love is beauty, and to reintroduce people to love being beautiful.
Beautiful. I love that explanation of it, just the individuals that, I want to say, maybe wear that outfit have maybe not got the outfit sized and measured correctly.
Oh, yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Right? Perhaps it's that suiting process of I got to grow into it, or it's grown I've grown out of it. So now I need to maybe level up and see what that looks like in embodying more love. Because I'm a believer that we enhance and we grow from different stages of loves, just as any
Yes.
other emotion happens, right?
Yes, exactly.
So we can add to what we already know and amplify it, just as you've shared the amplification of that emotional aspect of ourselves, really.
Yeah, because I mean, it's just I don't know. I just want everybody to be the best version of themselves. And I realize that love is the core of everything. And whether it's self-love or it's loving your neighbor or loving a stranger or romantic relationships, friendship relationships, even work relationships, I believe that love is the core of everything because God is love. And so when you look at it like that, like how could all these things be representatives of love that are negative? And like you said, we evolve and we go through different stages of love, and that's understandable. And I think also too, a lot of times we get different emotions confused with love, like lust or excitement or um, sometimes even fear. But I think that the root of who we are and who we could be and who we all could be together is love.
I love that. Pun intended, I guess. That's great. It makes so much sense. And I'd like to delve into it a little bit more in terms of people getting it confused or the emotional state confused with love. And I want to say fear, because they're really quite two contrasting emotions, right? How do
Right,
you
right.
how do you see that? What's your take on that, let's say?
Okay. Well, with fear, um, even fear itself, sometimes we confuse excitement for fear. I think fear, because it's so easy and so tangible, so to speak, where we can, okay, this scares me. I'm in a place with somebody that I've never been before, and this is kind of a new territory. I've never felt this way. I'm excited. So this must be love. But it could be, lust or even infatuation. It could just be certain things about that person or conversations you've had with that person or just different things that make you feel these flutter of emotions that it may actually be fear. It's just like this is unknown. It kind of feels good. Um I don't know. I don't know. Is this love? Is this love? I don't know. So I think sometimes even with that, with fear, some people can take that and it's like it's exciting, it's new, it's fresh. Getting the flutters, butterflies, so to speak. And so they can confuse that with being love. I mean, all of these are emotions and all of them kind of in some sort of way play off each other. But as far as it being kind of confused with fear, I think that's the part where I think I feel like it looks like it's confusing with fear.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. The emotions can mimic words and the definitions that we put towards that word. So, our own personal definition to that word can be what we're going to peg it as or what we're going to label it with,
Right.
right? I've seen that a lot. My interpretation of a word could be very different to yours, but I'm going to label it as that. And as I go out through the world and use that word labeled with my definition, that's where I think people start wearing suits that are too big or too small for them.
Yes, exactly. And that just gave me a thought about um, common sense. We like to say certain things are common sense, but there has to be a certain level of common understanding for it to be common sense. If you're a plumber, it's going to be common sense for you to use a certain tool to remove something compared to someone who's a chef. It just depends on, the common level of understanding. And like you said, we take our definitions of certain things and go out into the world and realize that our suits are different, maybe too big or may even be too small.
But also a greater reminder of we become the environment that we live in and the people that surround us. We
Right?
become
Yep.
that.
That's true. And sometimes we change our environments by the presence that we give. Like, I always believe that when you're a light and you go into a dark situation, you have, whether you know it or not, or choose to exercise it or not, you have the power to lighten up that room, brighten up that situation, and change the environment. I think some of us don't realize the power that we have when we go into places and then we just adapt. But because like I said, I want everybody to be the best versions of themselves. So I want to challenge people to, make the environment adapt to you. Like if you have this positive message, if you have this positive spirit, this positive vibe, get into areas and change the environment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I feel that comes hand in hand with feeling that you have the power to do that.
Right.
Because we're not all raised to be powerful beings, right? As kids, there's a system out there that puts us in a position of an element of control and an
Yes.
element of you got to do what I tell you to do.
Yes.
And I will be the chooser of how much power you have or not, be it in relationships, be it in the academic school system, and even in the workplace.
Right.
It's hand in hand, which is, I think, a beautiful synergy of the power of love itself, which is emanated so clearly through your pieces.
Thank you. Thank you. And we could, man, that you brought up a very good point as far as from childhood. I mean, that would could be a whole another episode by itself. But we have been it's man, like I was having this conversation the other day about how many different things that we've limited ourselves on because of what we were taught growing up and how much of it was, especially with school, was actually intentional and different things we learned that might not have been intentional. But because when we are kids, when we were very small, we were so fearless. I mean, we don't mind asking the questions that need to be asked. We don't mind jumping off of things, I mean, I'm looking at some of the stuff now that I used to jump off as a kid, and I'm just like, wow, that was really high and dangerous. But when you have that freedom, like you have that freedom to just to be yourself, to explore, to ask questions, and I mean, the innocence of it all is just, and at some point, at some age, when we get into having to learn rules, and I'm not talking about, rules like, things that can hurt people, but different rules and stuff, they become restrictions to our creativity. Um, they don't even teach art anymore, music anymore, really. I remember music class was a big thing. Even if you weren't into music, it still gave you an outlet to express yourself and to learn different things. And I don't know what age that, I mean, it's like we were just trained to just shut certain things down. And
Absolutely.
I wish that we could all just remember those times when we were fearless and we were able to try anything, we were able to do anything. And if we fell, we got back up and kept trying until we actually made it.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a sense of stamina, endurance, and persistence of curiosity of, can I really jump off of that board to another? Or,
Yes.
is that persistence. Whereas maybe when we get older, we get beat down a little too much and we just end up giving up.
Yeah.
Everybody has their own story, right?
Yeah.
So being in this space and talking about childhood and your love for writing that you kept a little quiet for a number of years by the sounds of it. Where did that start and how did that even show itself to you?
So I don't know kind of when my love for writing started, but it was at a very young age. And it wasn't until I learned about Langston Hughes during Black History Month that I fell in love with poetry. And we had this thing in school called a county writing test. I think we got it like every 9 weeks or something like that. And we were always tested on our writing abilities. And that was an exciting time for me because I got to somewhat showcase my writing skills. And I kept writing and got more into poetry. And it wasn't intentional that I didn't really share that I wrote poems. It was something that never really came up. And there was a period where I actually stopped writing like altogether. And like I would think of poems and have them in my mind and kind of construct them, but I stopped actually writing them out on paper. Or if I did write something down like on a scratch sheet of paper, that was it. It never was me going back to it or taking it to an actual notebook.
So, what happened?
I I honestly don't know. I tried to think about that the other day. I don't know if I just got too busy or, you know, adulting happened.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just stopped and I
Mm.
stopped, writing them out. I mean, I would think of poems all the time and like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And how I got back into it and how I ended up publishing a book. Um, my wife, I don't even know if we were dating at the time, but we were having a conversation and I told her about, what I just said, how I just stopped writing. And at that time, I had this really cool idea for a poem and I kind of told her about it. And then she asked me maybe a couple of days later, like, when was the last time I wrote? And, I told her, I got it in my head. And she was like, well, that's a great place for it. And so I was like, oh, wow, okay. And so I finished it that night. And then I sent it to her and I was like, check this out. And she was like, wow, that's really good. And then after that, it just sparked it back in me. And then I was thinking, I was like, I want to do a series of poems that tell a story. So I want to do maybe about 10 poems. And then as I started writing them, they actually took a different form and turned into about 50 something poems. And I was like, I'm going to publish this. Now, the funny thing about that is I was actually, and I still haven't finished that book, but I was writing a book about communication. And the whole time I was writing that, I mean, taking notes and, adding references and things like that, I'm like, this is going to be my book. This is what I'm going to publish. And then out of nowhere comes this book of poetry and then poetry about love. The poems that I used to write all the time, it might have been a few here and there about love, but it wasn't at this level. And so that was new for me. And I thought about it because I've always been a fan of love. I always thought love was cool, it was beautiful. And I thought about it, I was like, it's you really don't see men talk about love too much. And especially black men. It's just we're taught to be masculine, like hard and trying, just not show emotions and things like that. But people needed to see a man, a black man talking about love and the beauty of love. Because I think deep down inside, even, if you face some kind of challenge or something, at some point, you felt love in some sort of way.
Absolutely. I got so many other questions for what you've just said. Oh my gosh. So I want to go back to the piece about the little nudge of, I'm going to say, the woman that you were with at that time, whoever she is now, whether she's your girlfriend, your wife,
Oh, my
doesn't
wife
matter.
now.
She's your
Yeah.
wife now. Beautiful.
Yeah.
So is that what truly sparked it even further for you? Because emotionally, would it be fair to say you were cultivating and captivated by all these emotions that triggered that train of writing this love language of poetry?
That's a very good question because looking back at that first book now, some of the poems actually subconsciously told some of our story. And it was experiencing love with her and still now experiencing love and what love truly is with her that gave me even a better outlook on this subject of love that I thought was so cool all of this time. And yeah, it did help. She was definitely my muse on that project and whenever I write about love.
Beautiful. And what better way, really, Terence, what better love story than to say, to even share with your children and your future generations, to have that encapsulated in a book of, this was the love that Elmore Heritage had that created us to make us who we are today. Because ultimately, like you said, it's how we wear these feelings is what makes us who we are. But what a
Right.
beautiful gift. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, thank you. And you're welcome. And thank you. And it just the whole idea from love came from my grandparents. I have to I mean, just seeing them and their marriage at the level of years when I was in, I think it was middle school, they had their 50th anniversary wedding vow renewal, and I lit the candles. And that was a very special moment for me. I was like, wow, like I'm actually, even though they were already married, but I'm actually a part of my grandparents' wedding. And I just learned, different things about love and marriage for them. And then when my grandfather passed, I learned a lot about marriage, talking to my grandmother, more about it and stuff. And, I understood the different parts about, when it comes to marriage and then just them as a whole, because they showed me and I experienced the love of God by my relationship with my grandparents. And that's been something that's been a part of my life and a part of my family's life. Like it's we come from a family of givers, which is something I didn't understand until a couple of years ago at a Thanksgiving dinner. My uncle said that and he was like, we're givers. Like that's our heritage, that's our lineage. And we have big hearts and we care about people. And then I started thinking about my aunts and uncles and even my mother about how different points in my life that I've seen them personally go out of their way to make sure that somebody was okay, to make sure that somebody had enough to eat, clothes, different things like that. And then it really, I mean, it's interesting how one day a conversation or maybe a few words can get your mind to thinking. And I'm just like, that's who we are. Um, because my mother has a book, and her book is How Love Got Started. She wrote a book about the relationship between my grandmother and grandfather, and that's also strange too because as I was writing my poetry book, I didn't even think about that. And then somebody brought it up and was like, "Your mother has a book about love. You have a book about love." And I'm like, "Yeah, you're right."
Yeah,
And I guess because I was so focused on my own project, even though I've read her book a couple of times, it's so, like I said, it's so weird how you talk to someone and you start thinking like, yeah, this is who we are.
beautiful. It really is who we are. And the inspiration from what I'm hearing that you received in all facets, be it a Thanksgiving dinner or being part of your grandparents' remarriage, we become that environment. It's, I want to say, literally in your DNA, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
it's literally in all of our DNA, regardless of how it's been nurtured or not.
Yes.
But what I'm hearing and sensing from you is the activation of this drive and this tender um, emotion of love, and how to nurture it and how to care for it and how to unpack it and fold it so gently with care.
In addition to people being surprised that I wrote poetry, just the whole love thing kind of threw some people off because I'm, all sports and cars and stuff like that, the quote unquote typical guy stuff. And then it was just like, whoa. And then when they read it's like, wow, this is you. It's like, first of all, why weren't you telling us you were writing poetry? And why didn't you tell us, you could express love so beautifully? It was just like a total shock. And I'm just like, I don't know. I guess it wasn't the time and place. Like, I guess now is the time and place for, me to be spreading this message of love and trying to, like I said, spread love in a world that seems to be full of hate, because I don't believe that the world is full of hate, because that if you say it's full of, that means there's no room for love. But if you look on TV and social media and stuff like that, it may seem like it's full of hate, but it's not.
That kind of takes me to a place of our definition. And I'm not saying what's going on outside in the world that there is fear, and that's another definition of love. That's not what I'm saying. Experiencing love or experiencing fear, there had to have been both sides of it in your life. So, in order to experience love, you would have had to experience fear, because we live in a world of the opposites, the light and
Right.
the dark, the sadness and the laughter. We live in the world. This is who we are.
Yes.
As you embody more and more love in your life and as you pour it out through your poetry, there would have been elements of fear in the background. But now you've been able to balance it and maybe reposition your definition of fear.
Now that we're talking about it, it would have to be the vulnerability to share poetry like that. When I started sharing, I wasn't nervous or anything like that, or wondering how people would receive it. Being vulnerable and letting like my pen do the work. Like, I want to show the world love. I want to show God's love through my poetry, and being okay with that. Not trying to fit into somebody's box. Being free and just writing what comes to mind. And if I'm inspired by something, whether it's something I saw in a movie, a song I heard, a conversation I had, turning that into some sort of poetry, a fun and easy way to expose people to different things, any type of poetry. Poetry is I guess you could say, a window, and sometimes a door to letting people in, and letting people, and sometimes letting people out of whatever that's holding them back, or whatever that's holding them inside.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Beautiful analogy of allowing people to come in or out or get through it as they see fit. And I also feel that it's maybe less intimidating. If there are shorter poems, page or two or whatever, it's easier to digest and it makes it a little more whimsical, maybe a little more fun to participate through it. So I think it takes the pressure off of it sometimes. What do you feel are some of the attributes that connect you to, I want to say, your purpose of writing and your purpose of spreading this activation of love that you have and this desire of love to share with others so openly and so candidly?
It's my my desire for everybody to be the best version of themselves. Like even growing up in school, I didn't like for people to be bullied. So I always stepped in to try to make sure that people weren't being picked on. Whenever I have a conversation with people, whether it's at work or people that I'm meeting or in any type of situation, whenever I'm having a conversation with them and they need some sort of encouragement, like it's go time for me. I think of things to try to, help them see what's already inside of them. And a lot of us don't really believe we can do certain things until we have conversation with people. So I think, and I used to be kind of bad at this, seizing opportunities to really pull out of people what needs to be pulled out of them. And so thinking about opportunities that I might have missed, I try to grab those opportunities and make people see that they can do more. Cause I feel like we will never have enough lifetimes to maximize our full potential with things. And I think sometimes we stop because we feel like we quote unquote made it or we have everything we need or okay, we're good. There are different levels that we can keep going higher and higher. We can keep doing different things. We have ideas, dreams, and desires for a reason, and they're bigger than just us. I try to remind people of that when I talk to them, or whether it's on my podcast or whether it's in my poetry. I try to even share certain stories of different things about that I might have felt some challenges about to encourage people. Because I think we're all here to help each other. We all need each other in some form or fashion. We can't do anything alone. And so I just want to do my part by positively impacting people that I come in contact with. I want to leave people better than I found them.
That's quite a feat.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it doesn't always go as smooth, but I like to believe that I've sparked something, whether the person wants to admit it or not. I've gotten some sort of thought going in their mind,
Yeah,
and whether or not they act on it is up to them.
right. So, what keeps you going in your journey?
I've just realized that this is part of my purpose. My talents are God given and they're not just for me. I was given this ability write in such a way that it inspires people. I never thought that my poetry would inspire people the way that it has. And when I first started getting feedback, even now, it's just like, wow, I'm so humbled and appreciative that I didn't say, I'm going to write all these poems and just keep them in a notebook. I wrote these poems and I decided to share them. And then, even with letting people know that I was going to release a book, I started a blog where I post a poem every Wednesday. And I've been doing that consistently. I know that I have to show up for more than just myself. And I know that I was blessed with this ability to help people. That's my motivation. Like, I know that this is a part of my purpose, spread love in the world, show people who God is through love, to encourage people to help people be the best versions of themselves. Because thinking back to even when, like I said, when I was a child, just how I would rally for people to try to be a voice for the voiceless, just really have always had a passion for people to be the best versions of themselves. And I'm always trying to be in someone's corner, supporting someone, being there for people if I can. So it's just, I know that if I don't show up, then a lot of people are going to miss out.
Right. And no doubt on many levels, not only from the levels of your ethical upbringing, being a giver, but also from your faith, which sounds a core part of who you are, but also the impressions and experiences and mentorship that you have garnered throughout your entire life, your grandparents, your parents. The world around you has shaped you to be this being of thinking beyond you. And that's a
Yes.
gift. And that
Yes.
truly is a gift for everybody.
Because I try to see one thing a lot of people say about me is how I look at things. Even if someone is having like a quarrel with somebody or something, I look at different scenarios and it's always like, wow, you find an answer for everything. I'm like, but you don't know. I mean, you have to look at different scenarios. And I'm never trying to be on one particular side when I'm trying to, talk reasoning to somebody. I said, but you don't know. Like if somebody has a disagreement with somebody and they have all these emotions going, you have to actually have a conversation with the person you're having a disagreement with. And I don't think we communicate enough. Like we talk to each other, but sometimes we don't communicate. And when we have disagreements and things like that, if we actually communicate with each other properly and understand each person's point of view, sometimes we will realize that it was a big misunderstanding. It's just two different points of views. Sometimes we may even have the same point of view, but it wasn't translated properly in between us because of different things.
As you said very early in our conversation, it's a mishandling of the conversation,
Yes, yes.
mishandling of the communication between these two people, which presents itself as an argument, as a quarrel, as you've said. So, where do we go from here? You've written these books and you are sharing this message of love and vulnerability of being a Black man, wearing his heart on his sleeve, if I can say that out loud, to the degree that it's okay to tap into that space and it's okay to let that guard down a little bit and to create a sense of, I want to say, balance between that hard shell exterior that is projected upon us. I'm sure every mother would want for their children to tap into that love and that compassion, regardless of what gender you are or
Right.
identify as. So, what's next for you?
I'm working on the third book, and my first two books, the core audience, even though it wasn't intentional, was mostly women. I had the idea to kind of write something that was more geared towards men. I'm working on it now, and it's general poetry, if you want to say it like that, like lifestyle poetry, different things like that. And it's going to be from like a male point of view, a point of view as a Black man, and just sharing different stories, but in a way to educate people and to shine a light on the joy and the happiness. Because a lot of times when we're asked to tell our stories, everybody wants to hear the painful stuff and the suffering. But I want to show and paint a picture that our stories aren't always stories of pain. Yeah, pain and things like that happen, but there's joy, there's happiness, there's a lot of things to be proud of. And I want that to be spotlighted. I want that to be the message, and I want it to be such a project that everybody can take something from it, continue this process of spreading love in a world that seems to be full of hate. And I started a podcast and trying to get the message out there, trying to find different avenues, trying to push myself because I've been a podcast guest for years, but I've always dragged my feet for starting my own. And so now that I've done that, which is weird because I'm very comfortable in podcasts, but I just never actually sat down and did one myself. And so now that I'm doing that, I'm looking at different ways of trying to push myself out of my comfort zone and do different things.
Pushing yourself out your comfort zone.
Yes.
And isn't that something we all should really embark on? Should be
Oh, yeah.
courageous enough to do, right?
It's hard sometimes, but I realize that in trying to encourage people to do certain things, I will have to do them first.
Yeah.
That's what it's going to have to take to encourage some people to and motivate some people and inspire some people to do certain things is I'm going to have to do it first to show them.
That's
I'm
right.
going to have to push myself and tap into a level of creativity that I might not have done before or do something that's uncomfortable, a little uneasy.
Mhm.
But I mean, the funny thing about when things are uncomfortable, it's only uncomfortable until you start. Once you start getting into it, it's simple.
Mhm.
And I think we forget about that a lot of times when we take on something new or we try something new. Even something as simple as tying our shoestrings. When we first started, it was difficult.
Mhm.
Now we can tie our shoestrings like it's nothing.
Right? It kind of brings me full circle to that piece we shared right at the beginning. The layers of love that one embodies is almost like the layers of skills and the layers of experience that we all embody, and we go through life. We build them as we age because we have more life experiences.
I like how you said life experiences because some people think that age brings on wisdom, and that's not necessarily true because I think
Mm.
it's the more experiences you have that brings on wisdom. Because you can have somebody who's, maybe let's say 100 years old, but they've never left their neighborhood and they
Mhm.
haven't experienced a lot of stuff. And you may have somebody that's 30 years old that have been different places, had conversations with different people, read
Yeah,
different types of books, seen different type of documentaries, and so on and so on.
yeah.
And they will have more wisdom, you know,
Mhm.
so to
Mhm.
speak, than that person that's 100 years old. Now, there are some things that that person that's 100-year old will have over that other person. But like, how do you measure, wisdom as far as putting it towards age? Like, I don't
Right.
think that in a lot of cases that age really doesn't make you actually wiser. It's the experiences that you've had along the way that makes you wiser.
Absolutely. And how much you're in a position to embody the layer of love. Because if you can be vulnerable enough to love, as you have done and shared, it's through the love and the fear experiences that mold you into somebody more wiser, somebody with greater understanding of how to move through the world, but also to be the best version they want to be,
Yes.
right? I love this conversation, but I'm excited that we got this snapshot to capture some of the essence of who you are and what drives you to do what you do. And I'm definitely excited to read your third book when it comes out, that's geared more towards men and how they can approach this delicate subject or this vulnerable subject of love. So thank you so much, Lawrence.
Yes, thank you.
I'm Naranjan, and you've been listening to Master of Your Crafts podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review, and join me next week for another episode. Thank you for listening.